I had just poured my second cup of coffee, the lake outside, still catching the morning light, when Kayla dropped her bomb. "We're moving in Monday." Jason said yes. "I get the lake view room." She said it like she was reading off a hotel reservation, loud, confident final. I looked up from my mug slowly. Jason was sitting beside her, eyes down, rubbing his thumb along the edge of his phone like it held an escape route. "Temporary," he muttered, still not meeting my eyes. "Just while their contractor fixes the foundation. A few months, max." "A few months," I echoed, setting my mug down. It clinked harder than I meant. "Oh, don't worry," Kayla added, already scrolling on her phone. "We'll make it work. We brought paint samples." She reached into her tote and pulled out a plastic fan of pastel cards, fanned them across the table like a deck of cards. I was thinking sage for the bedroom, something calming. "And maybe we can do a mural in the kids' room." I didn't answer. My hand rested on the table, still and flat. Jason finally looked at me. "Mom, it's just sitting empty. We thought you'd want to help." That word, help. That tone. Like I was a storage closet they'd just remembered existed. I stood calmly. "You never asked. And I never said yes." Kayla blinked at me, confused. "But Jason said I heard him." I walked to the sink and rinsed my cup, my back to them. Jason cleared his throat. "The moving truck's booked." So Kayla smiled too brightly. "We're really grateful. Truly." I turned off the tap and dried my hands. "You might want to cancel that truck." Behind me, silence stretched. Then a chair scraped. "You're being difficult," Kayla snapped. "It's not like we're strangers." I turned around. "You're right. That's why I expected you to ask." Jason stood up, face tight. "I thought you'd understand." I sat at the kitchen table long after they left, my fingers resting on the folder, tracing the edge of the paper. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the space where their voices had been. My coffee had gone cold, but I barely noticed. Images from other years crept in, uninvited and sharp as glass. Jason, at 23, standing in my doorway with that same apologetic half-smile. "It's just 15,000, Mom. A bridge loan. I'll pay you back before the summer's over." I wrote the check without hesitation, even dipped into my emergency fund, telling myself he needed a start. He never mentioned it again. The only bridge it built was between my savings and his silence. Then the flood. Sheets of water rising into the lake house like it was swallowing its own history. Hardwood floors, buckling drywall, sagging, a smell of rot and silt that took months to banish. I remember calling Jason and Kayla, my voice hoarse from hauling soaked furniture alone. They were posting pictures from a Caribbean cruise, drinks with little umbrellas in hand. Jason texted back, "Hang in there, Mom. We'll come see it when it's done." Not a dollar, not an hour of labor. Just that breezy message and a photo of turquoise water. I had swallowed those moments like stones, one by one, thinking they'd sink and stay at the bottom. But now, sitting here with their paint samples still fanned across my table, I saw the pattern so clearly it almost burned. Every request dressed as a right. Every smile hiding a blade. I pushed the folder closer to me, opening it again, letting the crisp forms steady me. This wasn't about a single move-in. This was about a lifetime of taking. I closed the folder and slid it into my bag, my decision hardening into something unmovable. By Monday, when their moving truck rolled up the gravel drive, they would find the lake house waiting, but not for them. I didn't waste another minute arguing. That's what they'd expected: hurt feelings, passive resistance, maybe even an apology for being difficult. But instead of reacting, I got organized. I called Rachel first. She picked up on the second ring, her voice as steady as it had been during the flood years ago. Still planning that gut remodel, she asked, half joking. I didn't hesitate. "Yes. Start date's Monday." There was a pause, then a smile in her voice. I'll move the crew around. I've got permits already drafted, just waiting on your go. I leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. File them. Next, I scheduled a technician from Secure Home Systems. He arrived the next morning with crisp boot covers and a quiet efficiency I appreciated. By noon, I had new cameras at all entry points, reinforced locks, and a smart system linked to my phone. He showed me how to trigger a silent alert if needed. I didn't expect trouble, but I was done leaving doors unlocked, metaphorically or otherwise. Then came the paperwork. I spent the afternoon printing, signing, reviewing zoning approvals, renovation contracts, scheduled inspections. Every page a layer of protection, every signature a quiet line drawn in concrete. At the very end, I tucked the stack into a clean manila folder. On the front, I placed a sticky note. Just one sentence written in thick black ink. No is a full sentence. It stayed there, waiting on the table in plain sight, until I slid it into my tote bag beside the spare phone charger and my glasses. I wasn't planning to confront them again, but I wanted to be ready when they tried. Because they would try. People don't take boundaries well when they're used to stepping over them. The roast was dry. Not just the meat, everything, the conversation, the smiles. Even the air felt like it had been reheated from a past gathering, pulled out of the freezer and forced back into shape. Jason brought up the lake house before dessert. Since it's just sitting empty, he began in that casual tone he used when he already thought he'd won. Kayla's folks are helping with the move this week. Monday's good, right? Kayla added. With a grin, I already picked out curtains for the Lakeview room. Blue, light, and airy. I reached into my bag, without a word, pulled out the manila folder, and placed it between the mashed potatoes and the rolls. Slowly, deliberately, I slid it across the table until it stopped in front of them. The renovation starts Monday, I said, my voice steady. Down to the studs. Gutting everything. It's not safe to live in. Kayla blinked. What? Jason leaned forward. Wait, what renovation? I met his eyes. The one I scheduled 3 months ago. It's already permitted. Work crew arrives at 7 a.m. His fork clinked against the plate as it dropped. Across the table, my niece stopped mid-bite. Even the kids went quiet. You're joking, Kayla said, but her voice cracked. You never said anything. I wasn't asked, I said plainly, so I didn't feel the need to explain. Jason opened the folder, flipping through the signed permits, the contractor notes, the floor plans. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. I told you, I said, lifting my water glass. You never asked, and I never said yes. I took a sip and let the silence settle around me. For once, I didn't fill it. Forks stayed frozen. Tension clung to the walls like smoke. I folded my napkin, stood up, and pushed my chair in. Thanks for dinner, I said lightly. And I left them sitting there, mouths full of silence, while I walked out with both hands steady. The chime on my phone came just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee. Motion detected. Lakehouse. East entry. I set the mug down without sipping. My thumb hovered only a second before I tapped the notification. The camera feed loaded slow but clear. A moving truck. Parked crooked in the gravel. Jason stood near the cab, talking to a man in a company shirt. Kayla hovered at the front door with her purse slung over one shoulder and a box in her arms. She tried the handle once, then reached into her bag. I didn't even blink. Of course she still had the old key. She jammed it in, twisted. From the mounted speaker near the entry, a robotic voice rang out. Unauthorized entry detected. Alerting security and property owner. Kayla jumped back. Jason looked up, startled. The mover stepped away from the porch like the wood had burned him. I hit the record button on my app and let it run. Kayla turned to Jason, her lips moving, fast, furious. He threw his hands up. My phone buzzed again. Rachel? Hey, I said, answering without looking away from the feed. You watching this? She asked. One of my guys just called. They're 5 minutes out. Perfect, I said. Tell them to proceed exactly as planned. No delays. And security? She asked. Already notified, I said, watching Jason kick at a flower pot like a sulking teenager. Want me to be there? No, I said. They're not staying. They're not welcome. And now it's on camera. I ended the call. On screen. Kayla was still arguing, waving her hands at the door like the system might feel bad and open itself. The message repeated. Unauthorized entry detected. I turned the volume down. I'd heard enough. Let them stand on that porch as long as they wanted. The house wasn't theirs. Not legally, not morally, and not anymore. I took a sip of now cold coffee eyes still on the screen and waited for the sound of hammers in the background to begin. I heard the engine before I saw the truck. By the time I pulled up the camera feed again, the movers were unloading piece by piece onto my lawn. Kayla stood with her arms crossed, gesturing toward the house, barking orders like it still belonged to her. The mahogany dresser hit the grass with a careless thud. Next came the armoire, then the matching chairs tossed beside each other like yard sale rejects. I didn't react. I didn't message or call. I didn't ask for them to stop. Instead, I pulled out the number I'd saved in my phone the night before. The woman at Lakeside Auction House answered on the first ring. This is Maris, I said evenly. The items are being dropped off now. Please send your crew. The driveway's clear, but they'll need to work around some construction barriers. Noted, she replied. And just confirming proceeds still going to the foster youth program. Yes, I said, glancing at the camera again as Kayla stood with her hands on her hips, surveying her mess like she'd made a statement. The truck from the auction house pulled in 40 minutes later. I didn't step outside. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge anything. By the time Rachel's crew started removing drywall, the lawn was empty again, except for one folding chair Kayla had left behind. Broken hinge, rusted leg. It leaned sideways in the grass like even it didn't want to stay. That afternoon, my phone lit up with a voicemail. I didn't need to play it to know what it was. Still, I pressed play. You're heartless. Kayla's voice spat, full of rehearsed rage. That was heirloom furniture, my grandmother's. I hope you're proud. I hope whatever little statement you think you're making is worth ruining this family. I deleted it before it finished. I'd kept the receipt, the photos, the security footage. Everything they'd left behind was documented. They had dumped their guilt, their assumptions, their entitlement right on my lawn. And now it was gone. All of it. The knock came just after sunset. I didn't need to check the peephole. I knew that rhythm hesitant followed by two sharp taps. Jason. I opened the door and stepped aside. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with a look that tried to blend disappointment and righteousness, like I had somehow failed a silent test. You're being cruel, he finally said. Voice low, I let the words settle. He expected me to flinch to fold the way I had all those years ago when he'd begged for that loan and promised to pay me back. When he forgot to call during the flood. When Kayla needed a down payment and used my name without asking. Did you ever actually ask me, I said softly, or did you just assume Jason blinked? His mouth opened, then closed. The silence between us thickened. I walked to the counter, picked up the manila folder and held it out to him. Here. He didn't take it. I placed it on the small table near the door. What is this? He asked. Everything you've forgotten, I replied. The $15,000 you borrowed. The text messages from when the pipes burst and you said you were too swamped to help. The email Kayla sent using my name on a rental application. He stared at the folder like it might bite. I've kept every record, Jason. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew someday you'd rewrite the story. He looked away, then jaw tight. This isn't about the past. It's about family, about helping each other. I nodded. Exactly. Helping each other. not assuming ownership, not forcing decisions, not using guilt to gain access. He had no words, just the weight of everything I had let go of, until now. I said no, I told him, voice steady. And I'm allowed to mean it. Jason stood there for a long moment, the folder between us like a verdict. He turned and left without touching it. I watched him walk down the hallway, his shoulders squared but uncertain. And I didn't follow. The knock came louder this time, sharp, confident, like they expected to be welcomed. I stepped out from the side of the house, sawdust, clinging to my sleeves and my hard hat slightly askew. Rachel had just called a break, and the demolition crew was inside, pulling out what remained of the old fireplace. On the gravel stood two very familiar figures, Eleanor and Steve, Kayla's parents. Polished, overdressed. The kind of people who spoke in smooth reassurances and subtle judgments. Maris Eleanor said, her smile tight. We were hoping to have a quick word. We thought it best to smooth things over. Steve glanced behind me toward the noise of drills and hammers. It doesn't look like this place is livable anyway. Maybe this misunderstanding got a bit bigger than intended. Misunderstanding. That word always irritated me. It erased choices, ignored consequences. I didn't move to shake hands. This is a construction site, I said simply. You shouldn't be here without a hard hat. Eleanor's smile faltered. We just wanted to talk. Kayla is very hurt? I'm sure she is, I replied, stepping aside to let a worker pass by with a plank of old floorboards. But she's not the only one who gets to feel something. Steve took a breath like he was preparing a closing argument. You know, when a family's struggling, it's the elders who step up. I looked around at the exposed beams, the open sky, where a roof once was. That's exactly what I'm doing. They glanced at each other, unsure. Behind them, the new deck railing gleamed under the sun. Progress? Change? Effort no one had helped with but now wanted a piece of. You should see the interior, I offered, motioning them toward the front porch. Open concept. New wiring. Reinforced foundation. Everything's changing, including me. Neither of them moved. I tipped my head, adjusted my gloves, and turned back toward the house. Behind me, the old walls kept coming down. The house was quiet again, just the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floorboards as I moved through the space that was becoming mine, again piece by piece. I'd just placed the last reclaimed shelf into the living room nook when my phone buzzed on the counter. Jason. I stared at the screen, the message preview lighting up beneath his name. I didn't know she pushed this far. I'm sorry. For a long moment, I didn't move. Just held the phone thumb hovering over the screen. It wasn't anger I felt. Not even sadness. Just distance. Like I'd already moved into a version of my life where I didn't need that kind of apology to feel whole. I set the phone down without opening the message. Instead, I picked up a photo I hadn't touched in years. Jason at 7, grass-stained jeans, toothy smile, a plastic sailboat clutched in one hand. We'd taken it at a lake not far from here, before the layers of disappointment, before the expectations and entitlement and silence that built between us like invisible scaffolding. I placed the frame carefully on the new bookshelf. The shelves still smelled faintly of oak and linseed oil. Rachel had helped me choose the grain strong enough to hold weight, soft enough to shape. The photo fit there not as a doorway back, but as a marker, a reminder of who he'd been and of what I had loved. I didn't delete the message. I didn't answer it either. Forgiveness might come one day, but it wouldn't walk through the door just because someone knocked. It would arrive only when I no longer had to protect the threshold. I turned off the lamp, the photo glowing faintly in the dim light, and walked to the window. Outside, the lake shimmered still and unbothered. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the landscape team, and the next phase would begin. 3 months later, the dust had settled literally and figuratively. The final coat of paint had dried. The new fixtures gleamed, and the scent of fresh lumber had given way to the subtle warmth of baked bread and polished wood. The lake house no longer echoed with what-ifs or obligations. It breathed differently now. It breathed with me. The guest rooms now stood, finished doors open only when I said so. Last week I hosted Elise and Mara from the community center. We toasted with sparkling cider in the new sunroom, their laughter dancing along the rafters. Tonight the house was full again, but on my terms. A community dinner. Long tables beneath the string lights I'd picked out myself. Local musicians, potluck dishes, kids from the foster program running barefoot across the lawn, their joy uncontained. One boy, maybe 10, had looked at me and said, "I've never had a room with a window before." I nearly dropped the casserole. Now the porch was quiet. Just me, a mug of coffee, and the lake steady and open. My phone buzzed beside me. I didn't need to look at the screen. Jason. I stared at it for a moment as it vibrated, then stilled. No voicemail followed. He'd stopped leaving those a while ago. I didn't block him, but I didn't answer either. Some things had to be rebuilt on solid ground, and he hadn't picked up a hammer. Inside, soft music played. A neighbor I barely knew 2 years ago was refilling drinks in the kitchen. Rachel was laughing with a woman from the planning commission. The house was alive not just with people, but with presence. I took another sip of coffee. The lake mirrored the porch lights like scattered stars, and I breathed in full and unhurried. This was home, not because of the walls or the view, but because every corner now reflected a choice I made for myself, and I wasn't giving that away again.